Today, Rob Zimmerman and Jason Ulwelling from Agile Consulting will share some real-life examples of digital solutions for some of those day-to-day pain points. With that, we'll turn it over to Rob and Jason.
Sure. So thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Rob Zimmerman. I'm the owner of Agile Consulting. We are based out of Menominee, Wisconsin, and have had a relationship with Stout for many years. And we focus on a couple of different things, specifically that are useful to manufacturers, e-commerce companies, and anything that really needs to work with systems and processes. And we focus on the sort of digital side of that. So our two main revenue streams in the business are custom application development, along with sort of consulting on that process. And then the other side of the business is more focused in digital marketing. So today, we're not really talking about the digital marketing side of the business. We're just really focusing on the application development side. And what we're focusing on today for the MOC is that concept of digital transformation, or taking processes that you may be doing manually or in disparate systems and kind of bringing them together to gel everything together so that you have more efficient processes and better communication, both between systems, between customers, between employees, any stakeholders, right? And so that everybody has more visibility and better efficiency in the way that they work. So let's dig into that. So what's getting in the way for manufacturing, right? Let's start with sort of some of the frictions that people see, right? And this may be things that you see on a regular basis in your own business. So one of them is manual processes, right? Like the kind that eat up time. You know, we're talking about paperwork, right? Redundant communications, tracking things down that, like, maybe Bob is the only person who has the schematic for a certain drawing, right? Or waiting for an answer from somebody before you can move forward, right? Data silos. This is something that happens a lot in manufacturing. So information that's living on spreadsheets, or maybe it's in a paper log, or maybe it's just in someone's head, right? So there's no single source of truth where people can access that stuff. And that includes customers who may be able to find out information for themselves, but they have to ask somebody specific in your organization instead, right? Another one is disconnected systems. So maybe your ERP doesn't talk to your CRM. Maybe you don't have an ERP. Maybe you're still doing everything on spreadsheets. Maybe you have to enter something into one place and then get that information out and put it again into somewhere else, right? So all of these places where you're lacking efficiency. And then a final one would be visibility. So maybe there's no real-time tracking, right? You don't have a place where you can see where you're at on a day-to-day basis, or you're having delays in identifying some of your opportunities. So I don't know, Jason, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, that covers it pretty well. I guess the nitty gritty would be, anytime you're working in a spreadsheet is a good opportunity to try and get a new tool in place that allows you to span those areas. That's about the only other input I'd have there.
Yep. So digital transformation, right? It's about solving the right problems with the right tools, right? So what is it really? It's not just like a buzzword. It's not about ripping everything apart and starting over. It's about solving problems and processes that you have that aren't working as well as they could be. So it's streamlining tasks, right? Maybe you're automating some sort of manual step, connecting systems that don't talk to each other, or getting the data that you need when you need it. And because you know your operations better than anybody else, that's better than a software vendor, right? So the old school way used to be kind of that ERP kind of thing. And nowadays you can kind of use custom apps that will let you focus around your workflow and really build it the way that you want to, in much more of a lightweight, faster, and specific to your actual needs that might have been more difficult in the past. So what does this look like, right? Where we see people doing this in manufacturing. Process optimization. So that's kind of a broad category, right? It could be with quoting, right? Like some manufacturers have to think about raw material costs because they change on a daily basis, right? So a system that could pull in the cost of copper, right, in case you needed to price out wiring when you need to buy that raw material, so that when you're creating a quote, you're actually reflecting the actual cost of what you're going to need to replace those raw materials, and never kind of losing track of your margins in that way, right? Maybe it's a workflow automation or something that could be done by a computer, but right now it's being done by a person because there's no way for a computer to do it in your business, or reducing sort of some of those manual things that have to happen between departments. So it's not necessarily about replacing things, but it's just improving how they flow, right? Another one, again, we talked about this a little bit, is sort of that real-time data, right? So maybe you've got some information on a spreadsheet, some information on the production floor, maybe there's some sales data in a particular tool, right? And if all of that information could be together in one place, then you might be able to see better where you're at on a real-time basis, right? So it's almost like you're sort of chasing your information when you really could just sort of have it all in front of you at one time. Another one that's kind of popular that we do quite a bit of is portals. So again, it's kind of that concept of that single source of truth. So if you think about, customers might be able to log in themselves and download a technical document, or they may be able to see where their order's at, or they may be able to upload a request. Again, in that same vein, distributors or suppliers may also need that functionality in a particular business, right? So we're reducing some of that back and forth communication and waiting on things to be able to go in and find things that you need right away. And sort of the last one is that system integrations piece, right? Connecting sort of like your old legacy tools or different platforms that you have that you're trying to do your business with, and you lose some amount of efficiency, some amount of productivity in having to manually jump between them when they could all be sort of connected together at a singular point where you can see all of the information from all of them at once. So these are just like a few examples. There's other ones in manufacturing, obviously, but these are probably, I would say, the most popular ones. I don't know, Jason, do you have any other ones that you think of?
The dashboards is a really important one, and the data integration and system. We didn't really cover the data aggregation necessarily within the dashboards of pulling in and unifying all that information into one place, and then being able to customize the way you view it so it makes sense to you. That's a pretty important piece.
Yeah, sometimes it might be something like, that in a certain territory you have sales that are happening, right? But visibility into that might show you in a more tangible way that a particular salesperson might be stronger at selling, item A, where another salesperson in a different territory is better at selling item B, and that can be sort of fleshed out in real time on a visual dashboard where you start to say, oh, person A is better at selling this. Why are they good at that? And person B is better at selling that. Why are they good at that? And sort of that can be put together synergistically with communication to, relay that information across the team so that all of them get better at selling all of the things. So why is it better now to think about building something that's more custom to your needs? So a while back, and this is kind of the way that we all kind of think, right? This kind of technology would mean, some sort of really massive investment, right? And in the old way, it had to be this big system, right? Like an ERP, right? And there's a ton of upfront cost. It takes a really long time to roll it out. You're definitely going to be making compromises in the way that your processes work, because a lot of times with ERPs or other systems that are sort of out of the box, you're trying to take your process, which is a square peg, and put it into the round hole of the software, right? So the cool thing about what's happening now is with, open APIs, modern frameworks, we can do a lot of more faster focused tools, right? That you can plug into what you're already using, right? So even if you have an ERP, and we do have plenty of clients who have ERPs, those ERPs still don't do everything they need. And the cost to try to make them do that not only would be very expensive, but also you're still trying to have to compromise some of your process to make it fit with the way the ERP works. So even if you're doing custom development, a lot of times you're still flipping through multiple screens to get from one piece of data to the other piece of data, right? And it's just sort of like a clunky interface, right? So the new way is you don't really need that stuff. You don't have to keep buying licenses. You don't have to pay for the exorbitant prices of software development for those ERPs specifically, which tend to have fewer developers who can work on them, and therefore they can charge much higher prices for their sort of knowledge base, right? And still, again, you're getting that sort of clunky interface. Nowadays, you can develop something that we could whiteboard out on a screen with a client, and if they want, piece of data A right next to button B, we make that happen, and all of that data just works that way, right? So that everything is functional. So that's really the big difference. These sort of like targeted custom apps instead of these huge platforms that start at $75,000 and go up from there, right? It's faster, it's cheaper, it's better aligned with the way your team works. It's easier for people to adopt it because they've already basically followed this process, and now we're just putting the process onto a screen. And so tends to be a lot more intuitive. So instead of that one size fits all kind of thing that never really fits anybody, now it's tailored to everybody's needs, right, on an individual basis. So how do we start this, right? Well, we always recommend, and this is sort of like a best practice in the industry, we always recommend finding something that is holding you back, right? A specific bottleneck, a workflow that's eating up time or causing errors or frustrating people, maybe frustrating employees, frustrating management, or frustrating customers, right? From that problem, we will build a lightweight tool, right? And that's, using modern rapid development, right? It's going to be generally JavaScript framework, web-based, something that you can access from any computer in the building, but you also may want to be able to access it from a phone, right? A salesperson on the road, ownership or leadership who, isn't maybe at the building all the time, right? Who needs to know where things are at. So it could be just something really simple like connecting 3 systems together so that you can have all that data in one place for a dashboard, right? Or maybe it is we need to really fix our, quoting process. Or, in a couple of cases we'll show you today, it's a single source of truth that needed to be fixed between the business itself and their suppliers. So once you sort of tackle that first thing, right? It shows off like how powerful this concept is, and you get a lot of buy-in, right? And then it becomes really easy to sort of build on that momentum and iterate. And that is really how the transformation happens, right? It's sort of like one pain point at a time, and then you just iterate across the business to continue to have wins that save you time, save you effort, save you labor time, right? And save you money as well, and then also preserve customer relationships. So this is just kind of an introduction, right? Like we just kind of wanted to give a quick overview of what it is that we do and how we help people. And the next thing that we're going to get into is some specific examples that Jason is going to walk you through. But I just want to drive home the point that like a lot of the issues that people have in manufacturing that we see on a regular basis are manageable. It's just that it doesn't always seem like it from the inside. So having that fresh outside perspective and the ability to sort of draw on any sort of technology that we want to helps us work with businesses to save that labor time, save them money, save those customer relationships, right? And we're doing it all through digital tools that we can customize specifically to the way that a business works. So next, Jason is going to take over. I will stop sharing. He will start sharing, and he will walk you through a few examples of some specific clients, some in the area, who are taking advantage of this.
And we see the screen there showing up?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, to Rob's point, I guess the basic fundamental difference between the custom iterative approach is that it's sort of the opposite of the big ERPs. You buy this off-the-shelf software that has ways that it works, and you end up conforming the way you operate your business to be able to work within those confinements. This is the opposite approach. We build the system to meet the needs of your company the way you want to run it. The nice part about it is it's a modular build. So what we'll be seeing in a lot of these examples today is how we started with one idea and one problem, and then it led into additions as they realized the power of the system, the flexibility of it, and other needs that became priorities. They also got to choose their priorities, what things they wanted to focus on, what things they wanted to work on based on their budget, based on their own internal priorities, based on their problems. So that allows it to evolve as your company evolves. Meaning you might have this priority, you might plan on doing widget A because that's something that's needed. But in the meantime, you might find out that there's a different need that's wholly more important, and we can quickly switch gears to address those issues. So it's flexible, it's powerful, it kind of does everything that you need. It allows you to run your business the way that you want to, not the way that some other software might tell you to. So in this first example, we're looking at Global Finishing Solutions out of Osseo. They work with a distribution sales model, which means they have a constant battle to try and make sure that they have the proper marketing materials, the proper quote tools, and technical documentation, anything you can imagine that a distributor might need in order to sell the product. So they wanted a portal where we could provide all these things quickly and easily for a bit of a self-help situation. Everything is restricted based on the roles. So in this case, they have industrial, they have refinish. That's two different divisions that they sell through. And we were able to make sure that if a refinish distributor got in here, they didn't see the industrial. If an industrial distributor got in, they didn't see the refinish. So they're not seeing things that they don't need to. They're not wasting time looking at things that don't pertain to them. It's refined and delivers everything that they need. So if a refinish distributor wants to come in and take a look at sales tools, they can quickly get to sales tools. They can quickly move to different policies, different documentation. And because this is all in a central source, GFS can easily come into this tool, change these documents, and it's immediately updated for everyone across the board. There's no more hunting through SharePoint folders. There's no more having to worry about emails. One of the big benefits that they've noted to us was actually freeing up time with their internal sales team. They've estimated that their internal sales team is spending 15 to 20% more time on new client or growing existing sales instead of answering emails to provide marketing documents, technical documents, because all these things are just right there, ready and available for them now. And that was the initial, basically, module, if we'll call it that. This is the initial module that they were concerned about. This was their priority. This is where they wanted to start. So we did. And we provided all of these different tools, image libraries. We've got technical resources, all the stuff that a distributor might need. From there, they realized there was other issues with, like, hey, we sell parts and filters. Why don't we start selling our parts and filters? So there's not only documentation for that, there's also a way for them to order directly through this and then track their orders for those parts and filters. Another thing that was added later on was quoting and sales tools. So you can see here we've got configurators. In some cases, they've got documents, so they're still using some spreadsheets that they're out there, and they're able to update these and have them available in real time to the entire network when the updates are there. I got to remember where to find this now, but we also added a online configurator for the refinishing.
Using the left-hand menu there.
Yeah, this is their administration, so we can see configurations. So here we'll see the output of a quote that was put together by a distributor. So this is a direct output through an online quoting tool that they can then pass on to their customers. The big gains here was they were able to control the process of the configuration and provide all the tools that they need to get them the information they need for any products, specifically, individually, and it's all updated real time.
So one of the things to kind of point out here, right, is this is that concept of a single source of truth, right? And so in the old days, right, ways people might try to do this might be through, like Jason said, something like SharePoint. And one of the issues with that is that, SharePoint is kind of notoriously not straightforward, and it can be very difficult to find things. So one of the big advantages of this was that, they needed a place that was centralized for not only their internal staff, right, where their internal staff could access a drawing for a particular paint booth that was being sold, right? But also that distributor needed to be able to see that. And the distributor needed to be able to see the training materials, right? And then because of the fact that we can control what people see based on their role, there is some information in here that is proprietary to the business that only internal people can see, right? And then there is information that's controlled by the system that the distributors can see, right? That is limited, right, in comparison to what an employee would be able to see. So maybe a finished schematic versus one that's in production, right? But because of the fact that it's all sort of located in this under this one house, and it's a relatively intuitive interface that they already know how to use when they come into it, then it's something that everybody is able to sort of use and save time and money and effort by using this one centralized source of truth.
Yeah. And then another option too is when we put things into place, there's a process, right? So they decided to add a configurator or a quote tool online for their refinish side. One of the issues that they had continuously with quoting, now whether this is their internal team using the tool or it's their distributors using the tool, was inconsistencies with what they'd receive. The beauty of an Excel spreadsheet is the configurability of it. The downside is the configurability of it. These people were able to change things and adjust these documents and then eventually be doing things in a manner where they would return quotes or other sorts of processes that weren't actually part of their standard, SOP. So they would have to pay their sales team internally to review every single one of these documents and make sure that they meet the needs and the criteria that they need in order to complete an order. So by creating an online quoting tool like this, the distributors are able to go in and make changes to everything that's accessible and allowable for those specific products, regions, and for those distributor networks. So by locking that in, we've reduced probably 90% of the review process that's necessary for their internal sales team. So over the course of, I'd say, about a year of refinement and implementation of new things, they've freed up so much time from their internal sales team. They've tied about a 20 to 25% increase in new customer growth.
Yeah. So one of the other things, and one of the other things about these configurators is that if you are doing it in a spreadsheet, and I know everybody's experienced this, even if you're telling people, hey, we put out a new one, right? The new one is the one that everybody should be using, then somebody doesn't do that, right? And so some person out there is still using the old one, or maybe the one from 2 or 3 versions ago, right? And so by having it here, this is the place you come to do it, and it's always up to date.
Yep. The sales team also is able to review things within the system here as well. So they can actually come in and edit these orders and fix them transparently. So the distributors actually see everything in real time. They can confirm back and forth. It streamlines the communication, and it kind of takes out the remedial tasks that a salesperson has to provide in what you would consider a service role. So instead of them doing these remedial tasks where it's trying to find a document or trying to review a quote that's been delivered or anything like this, a lot of the time has been saved, and now those internal salespeople can focus on what their job title really is, which is to gain and grow sales. So that was the global finishing systems and implementation, where we started out with just document management basically, and then controlling who could see what based on their distribution network, leading into online quote tools, freeing up time for their salespeople, and kind of gaining all around just in efficiency. I mean, the more that they used this, the more their internal teams actually started using it as a resource. And we have a similar setup with Clemco, our next example here. It was the same sort of deal. They're working through a distributed sales network. But you can see in the difference, we see on our homepage different things. GFS is more event-driven, more configurator and sales-driven, whereas Clemco's big thing was orders and lead times. So their entire home screen is different because it's based on what they need and what they prioritized. So we have a lot of the same things. We have marketing tools, document management. They've also implemented a full catalog. So while they, in the previous versions, had these full catalogs, and this is how their salespeople would find their information, in the intermediate here, before they move into their online quoting, they get to provide the same thing that they're used to within the digital version of it. So as people start to learn the new way, the old way is still available. And that makes it easy for transition and implementation. Some of the same things, photo libraries, but you can see the layouts are different. They've opted to make things look a certain way that works better with what their focus or targeted audience is used to. So this makes a little more sense to their people. They've also implemented, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly that that lead time information is actually coming from their ERP. So this was a thing where, they would have to, a distributor would have to contact somebody at the organization and say, hey, I've got a sale, I got a possible sale here. What's the lead time to be able to get something back, right? And that would be a manual communication with somebody in the office, right? And so you're slowing down that sales process because you have to wait for a response, right? And the time that somebody can get around to answering that email and getting back to them, right? So this is an example of where we're pulling information that otherwise those distributors can't have seats to the ERP. That would be prohibitively expensive, and then you probably don't trust them, and you'd have to, develop some additional functions, with that sort of exorbitant cost to even let them in to see this information, where we're pulling this from the ERP automatically, showing it here in the front page. Now they see that automatically when they're in the middle of a sale, and so they can tell the customer immediately how long they need to wait before they get their part or their particular product. And they don't have to, Clemco doesn't have to pay for additional seats to get that information. We're just pulling it via API directly from the ERP.
Yep. The interesting comparison between the Clemco use and the global finishing use is they're both kind of going down different paths to get to the same endpoint. So with the global finishing, obviously being able to have a configurator and a quote tool online is very important to them. The end result is they're going to be gathering a ton of data. Now they're going to be getting information about quotes versus closes, what resulted in an actual sale. They're starting to gather that data right now. Where Clemco took a different route is they started working on the reporting end of it. So Clemco already has methods in place where they're tracking some of their sales data. So they wanted a place they could unify and see all of this information, and then potentially share some of the information with their distributor network, because obviously if they can improve sales and share information between distributors, that's a boon for everybody. One of the big things was matching the way that they're used to seeing it. So this chart, while it looks like a ton to somebody who's not familiar with their business, this is exactly what they're used to. So this was a very quick adoption. I mean, within minutes, it made sense to the people that needed to see it and use it. So the implementation and that sort of upheaval that you get with a sweeping change is like a new ERP system or something like that. This was done specifically to address this issue that they had, to gather this information from multiple data sources and then put it into a format that made sense to them. Now, this previously was something that would take them weeks to put together because they would compile the data. This would mean multiple Excel spreadsheets, multiple different websites, different exports, and then they would have to work to combine all of this stuff. And they would get this information quarterly, sometimes monthly, depending on the parameters. But for the most part, this was a big effort to get this information. And now this is updated regularly, automatically. So they can see this data and make adjustments hourly if they decide to, as opposed to quarterly, which is a huge deal when you're moving at the speed of business, right? They can also look at products. They can check out product sales. They can look at where things have gone, where they're moving, what they're seeing in trends, seasonality, things that might not necessarily show up in a quarterly report as well as when you're watching it real time. Because when we see things like, our classic blast machine is going down, well, let's find out why. Now we have all of the information in one place where we can analyze that in the manner that they want to view it, and they can make adjustments before the end of the quarter to hopefully rectify that information or that trend, right? This also looks at, filtering. We can change any way that they want to look at it. They can specify and focus in on anything that they want to focus on, because maybe all of the information is relevant to one person, but maybe we have someone in charge of the Northeast that is very concerned and focused about this area only. So that filtering is in place. The ability to check by quarter, the previous quarter, this month, last month. These are all things that could be selected with our date range, but in their case, they opted to make a quality of life improvement, say like, hey, can we just quickly have these buttons? And we're like, yep, you bet. We put them in there, so now they can just run right through anything that they might need to look at. One of the biggest things that they're real excited about was the visualization of some of the data, right? As I'd mentioned very briefly, they put in what they call Clemco U, which is kind of a learning management system. This allows salespeople to watch training videos and take short tests to basically prove that they've informed themselves and they've done the work. In turn, what Clemco does is they use that information to provide rebates or discounts based on the effort put in by their distributors. And then they can match those discounts to product sales, incomes, movement. And the biggest thing that we presented to them was putting this in what we call a heat map. This is the quickest way to geographically see what is going on with products, distributors, revenue, cost, sales, and they can filter and change all of that based on these filters. So they can come in and within minutes see, we've got nothing right here. Do we have distributors there? Can we focus on that? So within a minute, they can make decisions on concerted sales efforts or new marketing strategies or new territories to target. So it works similar to, the radar maps we're all used to. But we can see that we're not getting what we want to based on the red color. So they can quickly identify things that they might want to focus on, which is great for somebody who is in charge of a territory or say the state of Wisconsin. If somebody's focused on this state, they can say, okay, I've got these distributors, I've got these areas, and there's no limit to them very quickly finding out where they should have a concerted effort. So the comparables between GFS and Clemco is they're both taking different paths based on their personal priorities within their businesses to get to the same thing. GFS is gathering the information through their quoting tools in order to present a sales dashboard similar to this. Clemco opted to get the sales dashboard utilizing the multiple data sources they already have to get this sort of visualization. Eventually, they're both going to have quote tools, and they're both going to have this kind of visualization tailored and customized to the way that they want to see it, the way that they want to use it. So we've started with simple document management, and then over the course of iterations, time, priority changes, what their budget allows them to do at any given time, they've been able to make all of these changes, these upgrades, these improvements, custom and tailored to their needs when they want to do it and how they want to do it. It's not a big sweeping issue. There's no implementation hurdles. There's no having to uproot everybody's processes throughout the entire company, because it's all done one problem at a time or two problems at a time and within the means that they feel like they're ready for. And once you learn the process of the modular implementations and putting things like this into place, they start to see the value in how they can expand, how they can do it in a way that allows them to be efficient while doing it, save money, save time, and generally just come out ahead on the whole process. Now, these guys, both of these examples they're a year or so, couple years into what they're doing, and these are the changes they've made. This final example, Big Dot of Happiness, they've got quite a few years under their belt utilizing this system, and it started out as just a work order generation system. The business model that they use is almost entirely online. So we've got Amazon, we've got Walmart, and then we've got inventory. So these are the three main areas that they worry about having product in inventory. With that means there's a lot of different sales information and data that needs to be presented. So Amazon, for example, if we were to create an order, we get a list of all of the products that are available, and we will see sales data that pertains directly to the metrics that they use to try and estimate what they need to get at. So the issue that they ran into was trying to gather all of this information, put it all together, make sense of it, and then try to estimate what they need to do with that information was an 8 to 10 hour a day process, with basically one set of orders being generated per day. It took 40 to 50 hours a week for one person to make one set of work orders per day. This is now down to the point where they can come in and do this 4 or 5 times a day. It takes them about 15 minutes. And that's if they decide to use this manual method of researching products. One of the improvements they made was adding predictive orders. So after we learned their business and we became intimate with the understandings of how they work, what they're trying to achieve, what they're doing, we were able to look at the data and say, like, okay, well, here's the trends that you're doing. Here's the similar actions you're taking when you see this information. And now we can basically present them with the number of items that they should be ordering for specific order types. And now instead of them having to go through and look through all of the products to try and make those determinations, which we reduced to 15 minutes, now all they have to do is quickly verify the information that we're putting into place in a predictive ordering method. And they can change whatever they want to do. They can make this 50 if they decide that's what it should be. If they decide they need to get more out faster, they can use what they call a hot order, which is basically their rush. And they can decide where these are going. This now takes them about 3 minutes. In this single output, when we hit generate orders, this will organize all of the work orders in priorities, processes. It takes into account shipping methods, where they need to go, which ones need to be out the door first, and it organizes everything automatically and then generates multiple work orders and sends them directly to the work floor for processing. So what started out as just solving an issue with data collection and being able to make work orders internally, this system has basically grown into a full-on ERP for them, because the way that they do business it's not normal. This is their model that they've perfected over years. They've had a lot of success. So trying to conform to an ERP or trying to use these boxed solutions or off-the-shelf solutions, it left things disconnected. It forced them to work in processes or manners that just didn't make sense for their business. So they were able to customize the entire process.
Yeah, I
This
think that's a
means,
key point, right? Like they were using off-the-shelf tools, right?
yep,
For things like fulfilling orders, for having orders come in from their, Amazon, from their Walmart, right? But what those tools weren't doing was some of the additional things that they needed to be able to do. Because this is a seasonal business that's really based on holidays, they needed to be able to project, based on the past 3 years' sales, right? How many of this particular Father's Day, right, product do we need to make, right? Because how is our business growing, right? What are sales of birthday items over the past 90 days versus the past 6 months versus the past 2 years, right? And so even though they had something that could take their orders and could keep track of their existing inventory, at least finished product, and fulfill orders for their customers. What they had to do manually was download their orders from Amazon, download their orders from Walmart, download their orders from their own website, and then manually put them together in a spreadsheet, and then apply their 90-day, 6-month, 2-year algorithms manually through that spreadsheet, right? And so all we really did here to make this process go from 8 to 10 hours a day to 15 minutes was to just automatically download those orders and automatically apply those algorithms and automatically apply those projections. And now it's to the point where it's even more efficient because we were able to take that first step.
yeah. Another part of it too was their work order generation was very complex. There's a certain set of workflows that go with certain products. So we were able to build in those workflows with the products, and they also had on their floor specific lines that produced certain things. So being that they do a lot of paper products, there's obviously print stations. Some printers can handle some products, some can only handle others. There's cutting processes, there's packaging processes, and these all might change, but there's also some that are within certain groups. So what we see with the orders here, I was actually looking for an example. I don't know if I hit any that were multiples, but what we'll get is an order group, right? So in these cases, we're not seeing any secondary orders because it's a single order that went out. In this case, we'll see another order that was associated with this because it was broke up based on rules that they have set as far as priority, product type, workflow, and those types of things. With having a workflow in place, that led to floor management. So we can take a look at the floor, and in their case, they have a dashboard. We're working on our development version here, so this isn't real-time data. But what we can see is they've got different names for their different workstations and lines. So with each of these, we've got different workflows, and then each of these workflows that are within these different stations are assigned to individual products. So if an individual product has a Canon print, banner, and sublimation, then when we create that work order, it automatically creates that entire work process. It is sent first to the print, then it goes to banner, and then it goes to sublimation. So they no longer need to just know that on the floor. It's now in a process that is trackable. So if we look at work centers, we have different work centers that are also applied to these different workflows. And within that, we also have scheduling. So in scheduling, we can see in the print canon, we've generated work orders that need to go out on this. In their case, a hot order is basically an emergency or a rush order. So whoever's in here can decide, hey, I need to get this out ASAP. They drag and drop the order. And that is reflected immediately real time at a tablet at that workstation. So if we look at a work center, let me make sure I got that one. Got mini candy bar wrappers. See if I can find the workstation here. Don't know if I do, but what we do have is workstations, which I don't have the pin for because they changed them. But basically what this is this would be the tablet screen that's seen at the workstation, which in the order queue, I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but we would have a list of their work orders that they need to process. When they click one, it brings up all of the information on the right side with any notes, any specifics, and the entire work order process. The person at the station puts in their employee PIN, and that allows them to start one of these work orders. So by doing that, we get visibility into what's being done on the floor, where certain work orders are at. We get to see that entire process and track that, and that also becomes reviewable data within their reporting so that they can see, okay, what products are taking longer than they should? Why are they taking longer than they should? Why does it take so long when it's finished at one station to get to the next station? What's the holdup? It allows them to very quickly identify areas in their entire manufacturing process that they might need to address. And then they can just go out and do it. And this is something that they just didn't have before. It wasn't a capability that was there. And because of the way that they move things, their workflow processes, it's all very complex, and it's been built out over decades in the way that they do it. By matching that in a digital format and then giving them transparency and visibility into those things, they've been able to make a lot of changes, improve their efficiencies, cut down their costs. They're no longer stocking as much raw material because they don't need to. They're more efficient. It's kind of a win across the board. So obviously with the manufacturing floor, we have to worry about inventory. So they implemented what they call BIMs. That's their big dot internal inventory system. And they have different warehouses. And they have different, I think this one's probably the better one. They also have different locations within each of those warehouses. So now they have unified visibility into their inventory. They have unified visibility into their workflows. They have unified visibility into their orders. And the last thing was integrating shipping. They integrated shipping last year, actually, as kind of the final end of the process. So now that we're dealing with all aspects, what started out as a simple solution for just their work order process, they now have basically turned this into a fully custom ERP over the course of 5-6 years. That is completely tailored to what they wanted, how they work, and what they do.
Yeah, so again, this is to emphasize, like, this isn't something they could have bought, right? Like a lot of these functions that they have that are specific to their processes and what works for them are not things you can get out of off-the-shelf software, right? Like, for example, when Jason showed that scheduling, right? If you want to go back to that one really quick.
Yeah.
So in there, that was really based on the way that their floor worked. So what they had was a big cork board, right? A big cork board with note cards on it, and those and on that cork board they showed different stations, and then each note card represented a job that needed to be done. And if they wanted to reprioritize them, they just moved them on the actual cork board, right? And now, like Jason showed you, we can just move them with the mouse, right? And it automatically gets reflected at that workstation. So the person working at the workstation doesn't have to stop their work, go walk up to the cork board and look at it to see what's going on. They can just see it directly from their station. So again, it's a situation of like customizing the software to the process that the company is already using, that they know works and works well for them, as opposed to trying to have to implement a new process to match the off-the-shelf software. And so, you know, you see a lot of times companies that even if they have an ERP, they're not using all of it, or there are things that they can't do with it. And so this is a way around that, right? And again, you know, all things told, even though it took them several years to do this, right? It's not like they couldn't have done that in a faster period of time. It's what they wanted to bite off and deal with as they were ready to do it or as they ideated it, right? And so, all told, the development here in this would have cost, to get to this point, probably was about the same amount as they would have spent on an ERP, but they got everything they needed, right, to get everything built up from end to end for their business. And in many cases, right, what people need end to end to their business, when we're done building it, it's still less than the cost of their ERP. So
there's also the benefits of restrictive user accounts, right? Like most ERPs and box solutions, they have what they call seat costs, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. That doesn't exist here. The only recurring cost with this system is the hosting of the application and database, and that's all scalable based on use. So there's no limit on users. There's no limit on what you want to do with it, other than your imagination and what your needs are. Also, no huge upheaval. They bit off what they were willing to do, and then they were able to focus on those problems. So the inventory thing, for example, there's been multiple changes to how they handle moving things within the inventory system, getting it to shipping, getting from one workstation to another on the floor processes. That was all refined, a little bit at a time once the initial, what we call an MVP or a minimum viable product is in place. That's what do you need for this to work at the smallest level? And that allows us to get something into place very quick that they can iterate over. So then it's just moving forward constantly instead of all this planning on the side and theorizing. You get something tangible in your hands right away that you can be like, okay, this would be better if I did this. Let's try to add this. And they iterated over time to basically perfect the solution. Spending that money to do that has now landed them in a position where they have these tools in place. And now that these tools are in place, they're paid for. There's no recurring cost on it. It's done. The only time it costs any more money is if there's a change that they decide that they want to make. And a lot of this was born out of gaps between systems not communicating or processes just being way too much or chewing up too much time. Automating those things, filling those gaps, hitting those pain points. That's where they started. And then eventually it went to them figuring out they could do things better. So the systems they had in place, we didn't necessarily replace them out of the gate. But once they realized that they could do things better with those systems, then they moved in that direction. So with that, I'll hand it off to Rob for a little wrap up here.
It won't be an actual wrap.
No,
not this time. I'm not going to freestyle. But so Jason showed you like a bunch of examples, right? And we've got plenty of other ones, right? Like, and we've also started getting into doing some AI for people, right? Which includes sort of taking data and anticipating where that data could potentially go to sort of project out into the future for them. So there's a lot of different potential solutions for clients. It's just about, matching processes, some amount of creativity, right? And so, I think what I really want to drive home is, let me just run through these really quickly. All of these things are things that can be done, right? It's not the way it used to be where you had to just find a box solution and then try to customize it as best you can and sort of deal with the results. Now it's more about really figuring out the way your process works and then making tools that help your process work better, right? So the next steps, if you're interested in this, you would reach out to us. We'd talk about what's going on at your business and where you might have problems. We'll try to identify a starting point. Maybe it's one particular process that's not working as well as it could, or maybe it's a particular pain point that you need to improve, right? And we'll start at that point, and basically, map out a solution, and then we get to work, right? And so this whole concept of like switching to, more digital tools, right? This digital transformation or custom development, right? Those don't have to be scary terms. They can actually be pretty manageable and pretty affordable. So, so that's about all we've got. I think at this point we can open it up to questions.